Scientifically speaking, genetics influence 30 to 70% of our personality traits. This is why we fail a lot of times at keeping good talent. If you keep pushing someone to do something they wouldn't enjoy, they start getting demotivated and then hate the job they're doing.
Instead of focusing on what we can't do, what if our genetics could tell us what we're naturally good at? Hi everyone, welcome to Less Clueless, a podcast about self-awareness. Today our guest is Dr. Antoine Aid, founder of Meet Yourself, a startup that combines DNA and personality testing to reveal our genetically predisposed talents. We discuss how if we can find out our natural strengths and talents, and then are put in a position to succeed based on those strengths, how much more motivated and successful would we be in our work and our studies? Let's find out. Welcome to the podcast, Antoine.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Before we have you introduce yourself a little bit, I'd like to tell the audience a little bit about how we became acquainted. So recently I was having lunch with a mutual friend of ours, and we were talking about the podcast and how I've been doing these 10 to 15-minute solo episodes. And they asked me, so how come you haven't invited a guest onto the show? And I said, well, I don't want to have a conversation just for the sake of having a conversation, because this is a podcast about self-awareness, and I want to talk to someone that's doing exciting work that has real, useful insights about the self. And our friend looked at me with a little smile on her face, and she said, boy, do I have someone for you. And here we are. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do and the exciting company that you're working on?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Courtney for introducing us. And from the first time we spoke, I felt that we connect on so many levels in terms of what we want in life and how we align on our purpose in many ways. Mainly, how we both want to help other people grow. To answer your question, so I worked in consulting for many years, and I've done a lot of work with organizations and teams around leadership development, personality assessment, and so on. What I found to be the most powerful is when you help people dig very deep into their motivators. It's a concept that's been studied a lot, but very underrated when it comes to a specific angle of motivator. So for someone to do something well in life, to wake up every morning and feel, I want to go and do something and enjoy it, they need two things. They need to know how to do it, because the skill level would affect the performance, but they also need to be passionate about it, to enjoy doing it or motivated at doing it. And I've seen so many organizations spending money, energy, waiting time to get people motivated to work. They end up realizing that whatever they do will end up motivating some people in the team. And then they have to think, okay, how can we motivate these other guys? That's because we fail at looking into the individual motivators. Every single person that comes to a team is born with a package of genetic motivators, of things that we are more inclined to learn and develop in our personality. And that's the genetic influence over our personality. Scientifically speaking, genetics influence 30 to 70% of our personality traits. So sometimes what we are left with that external motivation, is that 30% remaining. This is why we fail a lot of times at keeping good talent. I've spoken to so many leaders. I've got this case. They have amazing potential, great skills, but I can't get them to be motivated. And this is what I decided to research. I ended up building the world's first triangulation of the three sciences that measure the three aspects of the personality. And that's the talents and potentials we inherit through our DNA. And I do an actual DNA test and DNA sequencing. And our brains develop these thinking preferences that we measure through an assessment. These give us our thinking motivators. And there's also everything else we learn in life in terms of behaviors, habits, values, competencies, skills, etc. And we ended up with these amazing findings. Tells the story of a person from the moment they're born. What do they carry through their DNA? To how do they prefer to think, and what they've learned, how they've learned to behave. A lot of people have learned to behave differently than their nature. They were taught how to behave at home by their teachers and later on by their bosses at work. What is acceptable behavior? how much of that acceptable behavior actually matches what this person's motivators are. Are they doing this well? Do they learn how to do it? Or are they motivated and they enjoy doing it? And that's what the tool that I've built actually helps identify.
So, to summarize a little bit, your company, meetyourself.me, has a genetic component where we take a DNA swab test, and then there is a personality assessment questionnaire to look at the nurture aspect of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct. It's a three-step process to generate the results. This starts with a DNA test. So we collect a saliva sample, send it
Hmm.
to the lab in a very safe way. So the whole process is managed by a barcode system, preventing the identifying information of the user to be linked to the barcode. So that's first step. We sequence the DNA and we analyze 54 personality predispositions. Then we do a 15-minute online questionnaire, which identifies the thinking preferences. And now we built a software, an algorithm that analyzes these scores and comes up with a brilliant analysis of that personality. But here's the power of this. Unlike most of the other assessment tools that I was used to using in my different interventions, we built a full learning journey based on the scores of each individual using artificial intelligence and allowing each individual to actually communicate with an artificial intelligence avatar that knows their personality and ask them any question they want about their personality. Because eventually this has different objectives. Objective one is I want to help people better understand their talents, their potentials, and live through their strengths in life in order to help them align more with their purpose. But I also want to help people in relationships and in teams to better understand each other. Because we all wear this persona made of behavior that we exhibit in front of each other and we react to each other's personality. But we very rarely know what's hidden behind that behavior. Give you an example. Someone who goes every day and do some routine task at work, and they do it well because they learned how to do it and they got used to it. We naturally think this is what they enjoy doing because they've been doing it for a long time. So we keep giving them more and more and more of that task. What we don't realize is that this person might already be doing it because they want to get paid at end of the month. Every single day, maybe they're thinking, is this what I want in life? You know, all these questions that we've always asked ourselves. Have I studied the right thing? Am I doing the right thing in life? So unless we know whether they're motivated at doing something, we don't know whether every single task we give is actually demotivating them and pushing them to leave the job.
Your test reveals our hidden preferences, personality traits, talents. And I think that's so important because you and I both come from this sort of interstice between East and West cultures, where yourself being from Lebanon and now being based in the UK, myself being between East Asia and North America. We've seen the two extremes of sort of motivation and career choice, where the Eastern philosophy is much more just doesn't matter what you like, doesn't matter your preferences, just be a doctor, be a lawyer, make money. You don't have to like what you do. And the Western is far more about, oh, the choice is the most important thing, this passion hypothesis of find your passion. And as long as you find your passion, everything is going to be easy. And that's also not completely correct either. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And I think what the Eastern side misses, as you said, is that they, because of different historical contexts, where different economic situations, where it was just more money, more external motivation meant more well-being, because a lot of these Eastern cultures didn't have this kind of economic development that the West did. But then we, in the more developed world now, we have things that are more important to us than just external motivators, because we're at a different point in the Maslow's hierarchy, right? So we're looking for self-actualization and negative reinforcement, punishment, criticism, and all, and even the financial rewards. They can get you from maybe 0 to 50, But then how can you get from 50 to 100 to greatness? And that requires a lot of intrinsic motivation. So, in terms of finding out our motivators and playing to our innate preferences and talents, that's very important.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And most of this happens sometimes very lovingly by our environment. Our parents, in most cases, want the best for us. They try teaching us good behavior, and they mostly aim to protect us from hurt and pain. We are the closest to our nature when we are born, just like a white page. There's nothing but instinct there. But then we start learning by observation, by being taught, etc. That's the environment and cultural influence on our personality. Now, how much of that actually matches our nature? What I've seen, and I've done thousands of assessments so far, is that not many people actually are close to their nature in so many different areas of personality. Einstein says the only thing that interferes with my knowledge is my education. The secret is, how can I redo something that I want to do that makes me happy, but doing successfully?
Sometimes I think people like our parents' generation might look at us and say, a lot of this is, oh, first world privilege or whatever it may be. I just see it as pragmatism, where if we don't play to our strengths, if we don't play to our innate preferences, it's just not sustainable in the long term because anything worth doing, as Mark Manson likes to say, you need to choose your suck and you need to endure the suck for a long time. Even people that love what they do, musicians, athletes, they still have to practice, they still have to do things that aren't necessarily glamorous. Professional athletes say all the time, I would play the games, play the matches for free. They pay me to
Yeah.
do press conferences and to train and to do all the things that you don't see, right? And if we don't play to our innate preferences and talents, then how would we endure long enough to create that success in the long run? So in the Art of War, Sun Tzu talks about know thyself and know thy enemy, and you will win 100 battles out of 100. And I think sometimes we only hear half of that saying, the know thy enemy, but the know thyself part is perhaps much more important.
I love it. I agree with you. I see that passion and that purpose in your eyes from the first moment we started speaking. You're doing this now because you want to do that thing that gives you a sense of purpose. And I want to tell you how much I respect you for this.
Thank you.
The other point that I want to comment on is the knowing yourself and knowing your enemy. George Carlin says it brilliantly. He says, have you noticed that anyone who is driving faster than you is a crazy moron, and anyone who is driving slower is an idiot? Because we put so much energy in life trying to adjust everyone else's behavior to match our preferences. And if we spend a bit of that energy into trying to understand their preferences, and if everyone meets the other person they're dealing with halfway, that whole enemy thing can be turned into a collaborator or an ally.
It makes me think back to in high school, I had two very different basketball coaches, and one was just so fixated on what I couldn't do. And I was basically constantly nervous at making mistakes. And when you're nervous, you don't perform. When you're nervous about being pulled out of the game at any moment, you don't perform. And I had this second coach who constantly empowered me. He just focused on what I could do. And that season, the basket looked like an ocean. Everything was just going in. And it's simply a matter of one recognized, use the skills of their player, their employee, their whomever to their strengths, and the other focused on what they couldn't see, what they couldn't understand.
Yeah, this is a real life example of what happens every single day. We focus a lot on what we see in other people and what we think their potential is, but without really going to their genetics and their thinking preferences. And you actually might end up If you keep pushing someone to do something they wouldn't enjoy and put them in a position where they reach their limit, the limit of their performance, and they can now start comparing themselves with other better performers, they start getting demotivated and then hate the job they're doing. My daughter, the other day, I was talking to her. She said, I got 97.5 over 100 on
Wow.
the math test. She said, but I went and asked him what was my mistake because I didn't get 100. And he said, you didn't have any mistake. It was all correct, except that there's this other boy in class who had the same answer, but his paper was cleaner. So guess what? She asked him. She said, so if that boy didn't sit for that exam, would I have taken 100? He said, yes. That's the thing. We are raised and taught in life to be not good enough. You're born with this first idea of, I need to look up to my parents. Then you spend the rest of your life living, processing the trauma of being parented by bad parents and being disappointed that they didn't give the right example. Then God is perfect. You will never be perfect. You human are imperfect. God is perfect. And then you'll try your best to be a good person, knowing that you will never be that perfect person. And so on. We meet these people in life. Then at work, it becomes even worse because it's such a competitive environment that people are always want to become better, compete, and then politics start entering in this game and it becomes toxic. It's all because we are taught to focus on our weaknesses, on things that we're not good at and how we can develop them. But we haven't been taught to reflect and identify our strengths, our talents and potential and nurture these. This is where your